SportsMatters TV, bringing the sports home. How's things in the States at the moment with COVID-19? Is everything okay?
It's yeah, pretty much. I mean, still everybody to some degree or another is locked down. Still, everything's still shut down. How things in Ireland?
Yeah, things are getting a lot easier. Today was the first day in about 7-8 weeks where we could you can meet people in other households, so you can meet family and stuff. So it's a good day here in Ireland, thank God.
Yeah, yeah, we're getting closer. So see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank God, thank God.
Yeah.
But we won't keep you long now because I know with interviews and stuff you're probably being hounded every week, every day. But we appreciate this, so thank you.
Surprisingly, yeah, it always surprises me that people have an interest and want to talk to me, but they still do for some reason.
Well, we met you at WrestleCon in New York last year. We had a brief chat, a nice picture. But obviously, your
Yeah.
love for wrestling, it's still there, Al. Obviously, you still have that passion for wrestling. Would you still kind of keep an eye on all the stuff that's happening at the moment?
To a degree, yeah. I keep my ears open and listen. I don't really get to watch a whole lot because I'm surprisingly, even with the shutdown, operating OVW, I'm still pretty busy and pretty focused on that. And I don't really get an opportunity to see much else.
Definitely. And Al, speaking of when it all started for you first day, tell us about wrestling back in the 80s. I always hear some incredible stories. Obviously, you were on the road quite a bit, but it could have kicked off for you back in the 80s. How did it come about first day?
Well, it was much different in the sense of the fact that a lot more difficult to become a wrestler because it was a very closed, very secular business, and the guys that were in it, they were held accountable for whoever they brought in. So think about primarily for a lot of those older professional wrestlers, it was the only way they could make a living. They didn't fit in the regular society in the real world too well. And not that they weren't intelligent, because they were probably some of the most intelligent, creative people, but they were so eclectic and eccentric that they just didn't fit in. So now you're going to be held responsible for the person you train that could very well ruin your opportunity to make a living. So how likely are you to be able to do that? It's very, very difficult to convince some of the old timers to train you and bring you into the business for that reason. And it took a lot. And I finally, was able to wear one down, and Jim Lancaster wore him down, and he trained me and broke me into the business. And basically I was kind of apprenticed under him. When you initially start, you ride the shows and you meet promoters, he introduces you, speaks on your behalf, and then you get opportunities to kind of show what you can do and stuff. And I'm always eternally grateful that he did that.
And we always hear about the bumps. Obviously, wrestling, it's, you need to be so fit. You hear all the stories, from back in, the early Japan days. Obviously, the training, it's unique, it's different. The bumps are incredible. Your life is at risk pretty much every match because there's so much danger in it. But how did you find, the transition? Obviously, getting involved, and then obviously that training. Did you find it hard from the start?
Yeah, I mean, your body eventually adapts and adjusts. You kind of like callous up after a while. It always still hurts, but it gets to where it becomes an accepted part of your life, and that's always the way that you can easily find out if somebody really has real passion to do it. Is when I teach people, when I train them, especially the basics, the fundamentals, I feel are so valuable or so important, because you can't build a house without a good foundation. And teaching somebody, I don't teach people how to land properly. What I do is I teach people how to control themselves physically in the air, so that then they can land every time consistently the same way. It does no good for a person to be able to land right one time and then 9 more times they kind of do, but they don't, because then that's where they're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
But in order to learn to be able to do it consistently, they have to continuously do it over and over and over to where it becomes a instinctual thing. And because of that, it's so repetitive that it beats you up, and a lot of people, can't take it. We started Tough Enough season 1, and there was a big bodybuilding guy came in. I think his name was Jason, and
Yeah.
he lasted a week, and he quit because he just couldn't take the abuse. And it's not that you go out of your way to abuse people to try to crack them. It's a necessity. It's what you have to do.
Yeah.
To learn the skills and to get your body to where it now can take that kind of punishment every single day.
Yeah. And I think you trained, obviously you trained so many wrestlers throughout the years, but I remember Dan Severn, the UFC champion, did you do a bit of work with Dan?
Yeah. I brought Dan into professional wrestling, trained him to be a professional wrestler, and then also worked with him as we were, training for UFC 4, which was where he made his first appearance in UFC, which we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, I got an opportunity back at UFC 100. I, filmed, got hired and filmed a documentary on Brock Lesnar's training camp, which was so precise and, so laid out schedule-wise and everything, because he was fighting Frank Mir. He knew who he was fighting. He was watching films. He was preparing for Frank Mir. When back in the day with the UFC, it was nothing like it is now. It was literally, there was no films, there were no tapes, because it was the fourth one of its kind, of anyone that you were fighting. You didn't know who you were fighting until you got there. And once you got there, it was a tournament that if you won the first fight, you fought a second time. And if you won the second time, you fought a third time. And, for instance, like Dan, the very first match, he had to fight a guy that was a Muay Thai fighter.
Yeah.
And that not a mixed martial arts fighter, a Muay Thai fighter. And then the next guy was a long style karate fighter. Not a mixed martial arts guy, specifically a long style karate. And then finally was, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Royce Gracie. So there was no way you could prepare, and say, oh, I'm only fighting this one person and I know his strengths. I know he's got a great ground game, or he's got a great stand-up game. We literally just made it up as we went along. And Dan, did so well just because he's an animal. So
he's an awesome guy. I've spoke to him numerous times on the phone, and we have to speak of the 90s, obviously, and the 2000s. We seen you obviously a lot on the screens, ECW, WWF / WWE. Obviously, you enjoyed your time there. We seen the characters you got to play. We seen your physique. You were always in great shape, always in great matches. What was it like to be part of that Attitude era? Because it's probably a question you get asked quite a lot.
Sure, it was great because business was great. We were all, morale was really up because business was up. We were basically selling out wherever we went, and that's really what because it's called the wrestling business.
Yeah.
In the biggest reward for a performer, there's numerous rewards that we get when we perform, but one of the best is to know that you've motivated that many people to want to leave their house and see the show, and that's probably the hardest job there is trying to get people to, even before all of this COVID-19, it was so difficult. If you think, like, how many major motion pictures have you watched in the last year? Major Hollywood productions that spend, quite honestly, millions upon millions of dollars to produce.
Yeah.
And, it's so difficult to, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I had a call there. It's so difficult to try to motivate someone to just leave their home drive to a darkened movie theater, sit in a leather recliner and watch something that cost millions of dollars to produce. Now, as a professional wrestler, I'm trying to motivate you to drive to a building, spend even more money for admission because it's going to cost more than a movie ticket. Sit in a seat that's uncomfortable around people you don't want to sit around to watch me do my job. I mean, it's an incredible challenge to be able to do that. So, and now it's going to become exponentially even harder because, there are going to be those that are going to be scared that, that they're going to catch something.
Yeah.
And get sick.
Tricky times ahead. Speaking of your days, obviously, in the business, the days I grew up watching it, you obviously made a lot of friends, Al. There's a lot of guys you were on the road with. I think Mick Foley is one in particular. What do these guys mean to you? Because obviously it's more than just a friendship. Like a lot of these guys will be like brothers, because you're together so much, probably 300 odd days a year. What was it like? It's like a brotherhood pretty much, is it?
Oh, it's definitely a family. I love them all, genuinely. I see them, at conventions and stuff. And for us at conventions, it's like a big family reunion for us. We haven't seen each other for a while, and we finally reunite. And, and I always make it a point to tell them all that I love them, miss them,
Yeah.
and but it's a very dysfunctional family too, because you are a family and the camaraderie is there, but you're always in competition with each other every moment of every hour of every day. It's so competitive, and everybody's trying to get one up on the other. But at the same time, if anybody outside the family were to try to do anything to anybody within, we'd all come together and destroy them. So it's really weird.
It's a good team. And we've seen you win numerous titles. We've seen you win the tag team, the Hardcore Championship, the European Championship. Obviously, there's a lot of highlights for you, Al, when it comes to, the business and, being there. Like, what would stand out for you, if you had to pick one moment or maybe one match, what would stand out for you, in your career to date? Because you're in great shape, by the way. I'm hoping we
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm hoping we see you back at some stage.
Well, I don't know. But I don't know if there's any one moment. People ask me that all the time, and Mick and I argue about this too, because Mick's like, "Oh, there's you can't say there's just not one moment," and it for me, every time I get to go to the ring is that moment. And there are some that stand out more. Some nights are what we get hooked on, the adrenaline, the magic of the moment. But they're all, I have loved to do what I love to do for so long, and I feel blessed that I've gotten to do it. And so, those nights that I get to go out there and I just feel so alive every time I'm in that ring and I get to perform. So it's tough to really sit down over, nearly 40 years and pick one moment. That's kind of difficult. There's plenty, believe me, but it's tough to pick that one.
It is. And the saying goes, Al, never say never, right? We've seen your physique these last couple of years, okay? You've always been in great shape, but in particular these last few years, is there any chance you might get back in the ring, Any chance at all?
I mean, possible. I hope so. I hope that there's an opportunity, but I don't want to do it unless it's, the right thing to do for the right reasons, and business-wise, and not just for my own personal glorification or anything. I want to make sure that it's, it really helps some, younger guy or does the business the right way, and then I'd be happy to do it. It'd be fun. It'd be fun just to come out and, have my entrance at the Rumble and just walk in the ring like the Bushwhackers that one time and get tossed right out and walk right back out. I don't care. That'd be awesome. So I'd love to do that.
Definitely. And now, last of all, just before we go, we see so many, people that want to follow in your footsteps. They enter wrestling schools throughout the world, across Ireland, the UK. What's the best advice you can give to them today? Because obviously they start quite young. It's a long road. Obviously, there's this, you've got to take the bumps, take the hits. But what advice can you give to them?
first and foremost is to find a very reputable school. Since there's now such a proliferation of schools all around the world, you need to really find a school that has a good, solid reputation in all manner, and have instructors that have the right experience. Now, what do I mean by the right experience? What I mean is you want to go to WWE. That's because most everybody, that's now, the end result of anybody's entrance into the field.
Yeah.
You want to go there, you need to, no matter where they were at in WWE, you need to learn from somebody who was there. Simple as that. You can have all the information you want on a topic, any topic, but if you don't have a commensurate amount of experience, you don't have any real knowledge. So even if you have negative experience, you still have learned lessons, you still have knowledge, and you've made mistakes that you can now communicate to someone else to help them avoid those mistakes that you made.
Yeah.
If you want to wrestle overseas, then you need to find somebody who has experience doing that, and an ample amount of experience, so that they can then communicate to you properly what it is that you need to know, where they made their mistakes, or where they didn't know when they left the country, that when they landed in a different country, these were the things they were going to have to expect to deal with, how to do business with, international promoters, things like that. You can only be taught those things from someone who has done it, that's been there, that has went through that experience. And it's so important. And understand, you're learning a vocation, you're learning skills, no different than going to a university. You're attending a university, and let's say you want to be an accountant. The very most vital, important thing for you is that professor of accounting has some kind of experience on certain levels that he can now tell you and teach you. He's not just going to teach you, in wrestling, they're not going to just teach you the moves and the vernacular, the how to communicate, the etiquette. They're going to teach you so many more things based upon their experience, and you need to find someone who can do that, and someone who understands how to train you the proper way. Don't buy into or believe that you can just step in and in a month you can be wrestling on a professional level in a real show, on a real ring, because you can't. It takes time for you to learn the basics and the fundamentals, and it takes a lot of hard work, and then it takes years to really get experience and get that understanding to be able to go and perform on an even higher level. And it can go beyond. And if they're not teaching you that way, if they're not teaching you that your real job, everything that you learn in professional wrestling is to motivate people to pay to see you. If they're not teaching you that, then they're not teaching you. Yeah. And you need to, it's essential that you find places like that to train. And it's going to cost you money. And the other piece of advice is that, you invest the time, money, and effort into yourself, because you're the product, and you're asking a promoter to invest their time, money, and effort into you, and you're definitely asking the audience to invest their time, money, and effort into paying to see you. And if you're not worth either one of those two groups doing so, then don't fool yourself. Yeah. If you want something bad enough, you'll find a way. If you don't, you will find an excuse. If you want to live a life that others don't live, you have to be willing to do things that others don't do. Don't approach this like a job, because it's not. You are in business for yourself, and your product is you. And if you don't care enough to invest that into you, then nobody else will either. Don't fool yourself.
I could listen to
You
you
can
all day.
do
I could listen to
you
you
can
all day.
do anything, any prospective professional wrestler, you can do anything you want to do. You can reach the top of the mountain. You can be in WWE, but understand, worldwide, there's like 900, and I think the number is like 952,000 professional wrestlers around the world. Yeah. There are only 500 full-time in-ring jobs that pay over 50,000 a year.
Yeah.
Only 500, 502, I think it is. What's going to separate you from the 952,000 to be one of those 500? You have to work and you have to dedicate and be passionate to do it. And if you don't fool yourself.
Al, you're so man. You need to write more books. We need more books. Your knowledge is incredible. But we really appreciate your time today. It means a lot. We know there's a time.
Sure.
But we'll catch up with you as always in a couple of months, and we'll always follow you and make sure we're plugging you as always, because you're an absolute gentleman and a legend of the wrestling world. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Al. We'll see you soon, my man, and stay safe. Thank you very much.
You too. You guys stay safe in Ireland, okay?
Will do. And we'll see you at WrestleCon next year, hopefully.
Yes. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Al. Nice one.
Bye.